Angel. How are you? Good, good.
The city of New York, Boricua from the Bronx.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Angel R talking. Today I am talking with someone that I met years ago, a Hot 97, and we were on Street Soldiers. Dr. Darrin Porcher. How you doing, good sir?
Angel, I'm good. You're the man. I'm so glad to have the ability to appear on this podcast so we can speak to some real terminal issues that are impacting on society.
Actually, that day that we met, we were also on Fox with Lisa Evers. She did a little,
Right, you killed it on both ends. You killed it on Fox and you killed it on Hot 97. You're a beast.
Now, was that your first news appearance, or had you done some before that?
No, I had done several news appearances in the past, so that wasn't my first time being on television.
Okay. Tell people about that, because that's important, because it gives them an understanding of why you're always being sought out, including by me.
Well, I guess I'm able to satisfy a multitude of different aspects in connection with news. And so, it just goes back to, I'm a prior Air Force vet such as yourself. I think we were in the same unit, if I'm not mistaken. You were in the 514th or the 34th.
Yep, 514.
And so,
yeah.
Right, exactly. So, I did that initially as an enlisted airman, and then I got a commission in the Army, and I became an officer in the Army. And so, initially I did the 4 years of active duty, and then, after leaving the active duty component, I worked at the United Nations for a year. After working in the UN for a year, then I was, I guess I became a member of the NYPD, did that for 20 years, police officer, sergeant, detective, and lieutenant. Performed a multitude of different roles as it relates to my 20-year tenure in the NYPD. But just at the same token, simultaneously, I still performed reserve duties in connection with the Army Reserve. That being said, the educational component came into play, bachelor's degree, master's degree, and I have a doctorate degree from Fordham University. And so oftentimes when a lot of this news stuff comes up, questions will arise such as military issues or, matters of importance in connection with social issues or the arena of criminal justice based on my background as being a police officer. So I think that multifaceted aspect is what allowed me to engage in a lot of these media appearances, so to speak. And as it relates to that, subsequently reached to the top of the mountain. And now I'm on with Angel Rodriguez, holding it down.
Yo, this shirt and this hat are both from basic training.
Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
It's starting to kind of, I've had this since '97. I still work out with this one, and this was my basic, the PT gear. I still have it.
So it's a piece of nostalgia. Just give you a quick story, right? When I went through in '86, we wore white T-shirts and the olive green pants, so to speak. We didn't have PT uniforms the way you did when you came through in '97. So keep in mind, we're talking 12 years prior to you coming in. But now I'm looking at what you're wearing. I'm like, wow, that's what the PT gear it was that they were using. And things have evolved, and I'm sure they're even using something different.
Oh yeah.
So when we look at embarking upon military service, you need to insert yourself into the branch that best fits the needs that you have moving forward. So whether it's Coast Guard, Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines, if this was the best fit for you, then by all means, that's what you should apply yourself to. And fortunately, it seems as if you were happy with your decision in becoming an airman, and I guess it came to fruition on the back end.
I think all these things happen for a reason. When I went in, they would address me and I would scream, "Sir, Airman Rodriguez reporting as ordered." And they asked, "Why are you screaming?" "Sir, Airman Rodriguez reporting as ordered. I do not understand." And they had to condition me out.
Statement. Yeah. Well, the MTIs, it was a whole lot of screaming and hollering, man. But I went through back in '86, so that was the natural order of business in terms of how you were addressed and how you addressed them. You presented your reporting statement, "Sir, Darrin Porcher reports as ordered, sir." Boom, 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 boom. And that's kind of the way it went. And it was very loud and a boisterous tone, so to speak. But I guess as time progressed, things have kind of trickled down, so to speak. And, it's a very different military now in comparison to when I was in, because I came in, it was 12 years after the Vietnam War ended. So a lot of the NCOs that I had in my command structure were prior Vietnam veterans. So a lot, you had that carryover from that administration was prevalent when I came through. And so when you look at reforms and things to that effect, because when we look at, drug use during Vietnam and things to that effect, there was a real seismic shift that occurred within the United States military as a result of what happened in Vietnam. And I was kind of caught up within that causeway and transitioning from the old military into the quote unquote new military. But I think it's something that's always revolutionizing. So like when we look at where they are right now, totally different military now in comparison to when I came through in '86.
My nephew just went through boot for the Marine Corps, and he told me they were really hard on him and screamed and treated him. I mean, even when I went in, they wouldn't touch us. So if he had to adjust something on me, my TI, he would ask permission. Rodriguez, may I touch you? And Rodriguez, may I put my hand around your neck for a moment? Like they would request verbal permission for whatever it is that they were gonna do to you, and then proceed to choke you.
Dress down, right?
Yeah. They gave me a nice,
But you want
talking
to hear
to.
something really crazy? Like when I went into the Army, I thought it was going to be. I felt for me.
You had to do boot, right? You had to do their boot.
No. Because
Oh,
I went in as an officer, so I went through something that we refer to as an officer's basic course. And
okay.
so, that being said, I felt that the Air Force for me was harder than what I did in OBC. Um, I mean, there was field time. Like in Air Force, we didn't have field time in boot camp, and
All right.
the officer basic course was longer than than boot camp in the Air Force. I did more in the Army's officer basic course. Like, all right, I don't know if you remember, you may not be familiar with Camp Bullis. It was a place in San Antonio, Texas, but it was basically a field, field bivouacs that you partook in for 2 weeks. That wasn't
Oh,
bad. And then
you
we
did
did
you
a
did
lot
that
more.
you did that in
I'm
the
sorry.
Air Force during Air Force
No.
basic?
When I left the Air Force
Oh,
and
in the
went into
Army.
the Army, right?
Gotcha,
Exactly. Went through
gotcha,
the
gotcha.
officer's basic course. There was more of the. I want to say the physical training was more demanding, and we did a lot more self-defense. We did this thing called combatives, and
Hmm.
but outside of that, I believe it or not, for me, I thought the Air Force was harder because like the alignment of things in the wall locker and how you had to like
Yeah.
iron t-shirts and stuff like that. Things
Socks,
needed to be
underwear.
flush. Right. Things needed to be so flush. Like I didn't know how to do any of that shit back then. So like, and another thing was, I guess when I went through the Army, when I went through the officer's basic course in the Army, I was far more mature, and I already
Hmm.
had. This was my second bite at the apple in connection with military service. So there were
Right.
people that were coming in like straight out of college, and they didn't really have an understanding as to what military life consisted of. So I think that part worked out well for me. So like marching and a lot of that other stuff, it was second hat for me. So it was relatively easy. But
Right.
yeah, the Air Force, like I said, for me, that one was more challenging going through basic training
Mentally,
because
probably, right? The mental aspect of it.
the
You
whole
know,
shit, the whole thing, like, and then yeah, physically, I think we only ran like maybe a mile and a half when I went through.
hmm,
So we did far more. The runs in the Army were much longer. Like we were doing 4 mile runs, 5 mile runs, and stuff like
hmm.
that. And that wasn't happening when I was in the Air Force. But the PT was far more demanding. But I think I was also in much better shape. Not that I was in bad shape because I was 19 when I went through Air Force boot camp, but I was um I was older and I was in far better shape. And so I just think that kind of helped me a lot in terms of getting through with the runs and stuff like that. That wasn't a problem. Um, there was also more I want to say the classroom instruction was far more involved and detailed in the Army for me because remember they're training you to be an officer, so there was
Right.
the purview of instruction was very different than like what I did in the Air Force. It wasn't really that difficult, the classroom instruction, but overall I thought it was harder for me when I went through the Air Force boot camp than it was when I went through the officer basic course in the Army.
Wow. It's probably the age and the experience. I think even within the first 2 weeks of basic training for me, there was a major shift.
That's
I
the
was,
hardest time, man.
yeah,
That's the hardest
man.
time.
I was in there
You're in oh
crying
shit
and
mode. You're in
yeah,
oh shit
yeah.
mode. The first 2 weeks, like, yeah, you're looking for the wall. You're like, yo,
Trying to
how am
get
I gonna,
out,
what the hell did I do? Why did I sign up for this, right? And
I
then
was
in your mind, you're saying
crying
to yourself,
and
damn, the Air Force this is supposed to be the easy one here,
yeah.
right? I didn't know that they're doing all of this.
I can't. I'm having a hard time here. Imagine if I would have went to the Marines, or I'd be getting ripped apart right now. But after those first 2 weeks, I adapted, and I
Right.
became. I was like a machine. I
Game 15.
excelled. Like I don't want to use the word institutionalized because of the
No, I got you.
context of institutionalized, but I felt like this was, like a fish in water. After those first 2 weeks, I was just cruising and I loved it. I actually didn't want to leave.
You went to Shepherd for your tech school?
Yes.
Wichita Falls,
Yeah.
Texas, right? You know, it's
I
funny. I thought the food at Shepherd was actually pretty good in the dining hall.
I
Um,
I'm gonna agree with you on that.
yeah, I thought it was real good, actually.
Those I love the omelets.
Yeah, the food
I
was actually
love the
pretty good there.
omelets. I I
The
I
good old days.
I've never had an omelet that was as good as my shepherd omelets.
Okay,
Yeah, I do.
okay.
I do remember that.
I
Yeah.
had to go back there years ago for a 7 level school. And when I went back for 7 level school, that's when I got the chance to kind of just stretch out a little more. And I would never live in Wichita Falls, but at the same token, it wasn't bad, man.
So you also did, as you mentioned in the beginning, a long period with the NYPD. Um, how do you feel about the current environment?
What was my assessment of what's going on right now in connection with the current
It just,
culture or climate,
yeah,
so to speak? I
yeah.
really think that this is a real echo and sentiment of the failed policies of the Deblasio administration. He, in no way, shape, or form, had his hand on the pulse. Based on him
Mm,
being out of touch, the public safety of the 8.5 million citizens in New York have suffered as a result of his inability to act accordingly. There's been a series of different provisions that he's enacted that has subsequently taken the city back 30 years as opposed to progressing us to a different place. And it's so unfortunate because when he was elected as mayor, he walked into a schematic that was sound under the Bloomberg administration. And in no way,
mm,
shape, or form am I a person that touts the successes of Bloomberg. But I think what Bloomberg did was he just basically retrace the steps of the Giuliani administration in connection with public safety. And so it wasn't really a hard fix for him, so to speak. I shouldn't say there was no fix. But then when we went into the de Blasio administration, he did the same thing. He just retraced the path of the de Blasio, of the Bloomberg administration. But in the wake of the death of George Floyd, that's when things just kind of got chaotic and out of control. And he didn't have a true understanding or recipe for success and repair. And so as a result, things just went hog wild. We had shootings that reached meteoric numbers. There has
mm.
been no answers from the public safety sentiment in connection with the police department. The police officers, or I should say the police department as a whole, are the avid professionals, and as a result of them being the practitioners, we need to let them do what they do best in terms of securing the city accordingly. I walk down the street, there's thousands of people riding bicycles the wrong way, doing all types of crazy things, lighting off fireworks. Just this summer, for example, I
Mm.
felt like I was in fucking Afghanistan or Iraq in terms of the number of fireworks that I heard, and there was nothing done. He was very specific in trying to have the officers reframe as opposed to being proactive.
All
And when
right.
you have a situation or a crisis that's plaguing the city, such as what we've seen over the last couple of months, you need to be proactive and not reactive. The shit show that occurred down by City Hall when we had people literally bomb that area with graffiti and property damage and things to that effect. And he, in no way, shape, or form, drove a proactive strategy to, okay, we need to get these assholes the fuck out of here and clean up the city. He just kind of sat back, let it happen, and they subsequently destroyed the city block by block. When you look at what happened on 34th Street, when they ran in and looted Macy's, when you look at what happened on Fordham Road in the Bronx, when they ran in and looted that area. The same holds true when they went down into the Tribeca area and looted all of those high-end stores. This was a failure of the de Blasio administration. Nothing was done. Absolute worst man that I've ever seen in the history. And I go back to, I was a cop back in the 90s during the crack epidemic, whereas the crack wars were destroying the city of New York. We were upwards of 2,200 homicides. But the one thing that did happen under the Dinkins administration was he had somewhat of a pedestrian strategy as it relates to public safety initially, but then it got to a point towards the end of the administration, the gloves came off. They hired police officers in epic proportions, and then they put in these impact zones, and that's when we had something referred to as Operation Takeback, where we had proactive enforcement that subsequently started to decline the crime rate. And then when Giuliani came in, all he did was he just attached to what happened at the end of the Dinkins administration in terms of the high numbers of cops. This is a time that you need to put your foot down. You have to put your foot up people's asses when the shit is not going the way it's supposed to. When I tell you put your foot up somebody's ass, I'm not telling you to whip somebody's ass, but what I'm telling you is now is the time we need to implement a level of omnipresence and go after these people that are bringing illegal guns into the city. They're plaguing our city with violence. They're shooting off fireworks at these crazy hours. It's not happening so much now, but compared to what was happening in the past, we need to do something. We have a gazillion people riding bikes committing to awful acts of fuckery that are going basically with impunity. Every time I come outside, if it was up to me, I would take all of those city bikes, round them up, and run them into the goddamn sea. When we look at how you have these delivery people that are on cell phones with these motorized bicycles, and they just don't give a flying fuck. They'll go down the wrong way. They'll go down the right way. They'll run you over on the goddamn sidewalk, and it doesn't matter. And you know what? Nothing is being done about this shit. And this is all a testament to Mayor de Blasio, the public advocate, Jumaane Williams, and Corey Johnson, who is the president, or I should say the speaker of the city council. Those three lunatics need to go in the catechism of fuckery and being run into the sea. You really want to know how I really feel?
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you go ahead and tell us how you really feel?
Now that we got that out of the way, I'll tell you how I really feel about this.
The 80s and early 90s, New York didn't feel safe. It was crazy. Like the diss that we used to do was your mom works at 42nd Street. You know, and you know what that implied back then, right? You know, that was the diss back then. Oh, yeah, your mother works at 42nd. Now it means, oh yeah, she does work at the M&M store, you know, at 42nd Street. It's an entirely different thing. But I've been feeling like New York has been regressing towards that type of an era.
100 miles an hour.
Ever since COVID hit, it really, you know, I mean, next door to me, there's already been 2 shootings, including a drive-by. I'm talking about like right downstairs. The bullet holes are still at the building, you know. And I live in a nice, quiet neighborhood, you know. I don't know what's going on. I've been trying to figure out who's running now, who's in there, to see if there's someone who's going to be able to take the reins and sort this out, because it's not. I feel like I'm walking the streets and I happen to become the 17-year-old kid who walked around in the South Bronx just to be able to walk down my block and not get eaten alive, you know?
I mean, this is just crazy, you know, and nothing is being done. There's no solution. There's no plausible alternative to take us to a better place. We hear speeches and not solutions from Mayor de Blasio. We just recently had the chief of patrol in the NYPD, Fausto Pichardo, step down because he was engaged in a cantankerous relationship with the mayor in relation to what the crime control strategy should be moving forward. We look at bail reform. We're operating something I refer to as a catch and release stream. People get locked up and they're out in 2 hours to commit more crimes. And this runs consistent with de Blasio's policies that are not good for New York. I just think that at what point does he put his finger to the pulse and say, okay, enough already, let me get something done? And we look at a lot of the failed policies in connection with Thrive NYC, where we had $900 million that has since gone unaccounted for based on a program or project that he and his wife were funding or managing in connection with helping or providing assistance to the homeless. And then we move forward to we see defunding the NYPD by $1 billion. I know where that $900 million went. You know what I mean? That went to Deblasio's personal coffers, and the defunding of the NYPD by $1 billion is being used to basically re-up those funds that were lost under the Thrive NYC. It's just a real problem, and the city is just going backwards. We look at the mass exodus of people in New York that are middle to upper income. You know, we look at
moving companies.
Properties.
The moving companies have said that this is the busiest they've been in years.
And what it does is it impacts on the city socioeconomically, because that's a recession in tax revenue that's definitely needed in terms of the resurgence in the wake of after the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic is not over. We're still in the process of going through it, but this is another example of mismanagement from City Hall, which clearly shows that this wasn't the guy that should have been in office. And I was never a fan of his from when he was the public advocate. I felt that he was just basically a bag of hot air that had no solutions in all speeches, and this subsequently came to fruition as we see right now. The city is under siege, man. And then one of the things that I look to is, like him or not, Donald Trump being the president, if you need federal funds and you are the New York City mayor, this is the time that you need to employ a level of diplomacy. Don't go in and say, fuck you, you're not shit, I hate your guts, and then expect to come and sit down with the president and him allot a grant of billions of dollars to the city. It's not gonna happen. And if you wanna be a plausibly
that's real
successful,
talk right there.
right?
If
you want to
people
be
won't like to hear that, right? But it's real talk.
If you want to be a plausibly successful elected official, you need to be able to employ diplomacy through the active discourse, not just you're not shit, this is what it is. And then another issue is Deblasio and Como. Como's another zero. The state police have 5,000 state troopers for the entire state of New York. The NYPD has 36,000 cops just for New York City alone. They got into a posturing competition between Deblasio and Como. And so what Como does is he now deploys a contingent of state troopers into the city, which are doing absolutely nothing outside of sitting on the side of highways and issuing summonses. And this goes back to the citizens of the state of New York are paying a tax revenue out of their tax dollars to support that contingent of state troopers that are here in New York City. I would have been in a wholehearted agreement for having state troopers in New York if you position them in the hot zones where we're experiencing the meteoric rise in gun violence. If we send them to Brownsville, we send them to Harlem, we send them to the South Bronx, and merely place them in a component of omnipresence. If they're going to respond to these situations, fine, but not sit your ass on the side of the highway pulling over speeders. That's not what we need. We are under siege. And it goes back to the mayor and governor are going through this thing between themselves, and it's ultimately hurting us as citizens. They failed to employ diplomacy for the betterment of us as citizens, and we clearly see the end result of two tragically flawed politicians as a result.
These are supposed to be adults. You know, I've had on
Zeros.
I've had on this very podcast, I've had Trump supporters, and I've been able to have dialogue and understanding, and I would consider them friends. You know, how can we little people, right, do this, but these people at the position of power can't have a can't have a dialogue? You know, I don't necessarily agree. So I had a Latino Trump supporter come on, and we were talking and engaging, and I didn't agree with what he said, but that doesn't mean that I can't talk to him. That doesn't mean that we can't agree on some things and in some way try to find a consensus. You know, that's the problem with these politicians and with society in general, right? Because whenever I put up if I put up a post that says Trump did something good, this is what he did, right? I am not saying that I agree with everything Trump did. I'm not saying that I am going to vote for Trump. I'm not saying that I'm a Trump supporter. I'm saying he did a good thing. And I am acknowledging that good thing.
And
If
you
I
probably
do,
extreme blind backlash, whether it was
oh,
good or bad, what was
I get
posted. And that
attacked.
just goes to how people are blinded by their politics and unable to view through the lens of what's right for society.
Yeah, I get attacked. I've had people unfriend me, you know, and I said, guys, do you not see how often I call him on the things that I don't like? But if he did something right, why can't I not give him credit? Why can't I not? He released a black grandma from prison who was imprisoned, in my
Criminal
opinion.
justice reform.
You know,
Far too long. It was an excessive time of imprisonment. And I saw that because it was a nonviolent offense.
and I think that was a good thing.
Right.
I think that was a good thing. And I got attacked. I get attacked for it. And, you know, that's the problem. It's not just the politicians amongst themselves. It's us people, individuals at the lower level too, who whenever we do try to be reasonable, I've been told that I flip flop. And I don't flip flop. If Trump did something good, I'm going to give him his props. You know,
Right.
if Deblasio did something good, which
one thing that he did, Angel, not to cut you off, one thing that I give him an immense credit for is when he ran for president. Because when he ran for president, he now universalized his incompetence throughout the whole country, and we all got the chance to identify the zero that he is. He polled lower than 1%. And so I think that was the best thing that he ever did, because he now just put his incompetence on display to the whole country.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about. That try to change his whole look with skinny jeans and, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I mocked the guy, but at the end of the day, we're the ones who suffer because the city's,
absolutely.
You know, look at the city right now where it's at. You know, I always compare us, and we're not even that old, so it's kind of arrogant of me to say it, but like I've said, look at the Roman Empire. You know, they were like the most powerful empire for a time, and now gone. Is that where we're headed? 200 years from now, are they going to look back and look at those Americans? They had so much going for them, but they destroyed themselves because they couldn't simply talk.
I'm glad that you had me on, and we were able to discuss some terminal issues of relevance that are impacting on our society. And, you know, just we have an information exchange in connection with the way I see things, the way you see things. And hopefully, as we gradually progress as a society, we will better enable ourselves to sit down at the table and engage in an information exchange that puts us in a better place, as opposed to being torn apart by the separation and division that's been plaguing us over the last few years.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, once again, man, it was a pleasure being on with you. And hopefully
it's
I
good
can
talking
hear
to you,
again
man.
sometime in the future.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's good talking to you, brother.
All right, Angel. All right, take care of yourself.
All right, be easy, man. Take care.
All right, you too.
You are listening to the NYC Talking podcast. www.nyctalking.com. Please like NYC Talking on Facebook. Please follow Angel R. Talk on Twitter and Instagram. We are NYC Talking, the realest lifestyle blog ever. Thanks for listening.